My brothers mocked the necklace I inherited, but when they discover its value, they panic. Claire Elizabeth Harrison held the small necklace tightly between her trembling fingers as her brothers' laughter echoed through the probate courtroom. The reading of their grandmother's will had finished just minutes ago, and she was still trying to process what had just happened. "Seriously, Claire, you got that old trinket while we got the house and the real jewelry?" said Douglas, the oldest brother, wiping tears from laughing so hard. "Grandma must have gotten confused in her old age." Bradley, the middle brother, shook his head with a mocking smile as he put the inheritance documents in his suit pocket. "At least she won't have any trouble taking care of anything important," he commented, patting Claire on the shoulder as if to console her. "Imagine if she had been put in charge of Grandma's house. She'd be selling everything off to pay the bills in no time." Claire pressed her lips together, feeling her face grow hot with humiliation. The people in the probate courtroom looked on with pity, whispering among themselves about the unequal division of the estate. She had known that necklace since she was little, always hanging around her grandmother's neck during Sunday visits, but she never imagined it would be her only keepsake from the woman who raised her after their parents left. "Grandma always wore this necklace," she murmured, more to herself than to her brothers. "Of course she did," laughed Douglas, "because she didn't have anything better to wear. Now that we've seen the real jewelry she kept in the safe, we can understand why this one was forgotten in a drawer." The family lawyer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Well, all the documents are in order. Mrs. Elizabeth left everything very clear in the will. Each heir receives exactly what was specified." Bradley laughed again, jingling the keys to the inherited house. "At least you don't need to share space in the safe to store this treasure," he said, pointing to the necklace in Claire's hands. Douglas approached his sister with an expression trying to seem friendly. "Look, Claire, if you want to sell this thing and split the money between the three of us as a gesture of equality, I'm all for it. It should fetch $50 at most, but it's better than nothing." Claire swallowed hard, feeling her throat tighten. "I'm not selling it. This necklace has sentimental value to me." The burst of laughter from her two brothers was so loud that other people in the probate court turned to see what was happening. "Sentimental value?" guffawed Bradley. "Claire, are you serious? It's a piece of old metal with some little stones that don't even shine properly." "Let her have her fantasies," said Douglas, picking up the papers from the table. "She was always a bit of a dreamer anyway. Come on, Bradley, let's go see our new house." The two brothers left the room still laughing, leaving Claire alone with the necklace and the weight of humiliation. She looked at the small piece of jewelry in the palm of her hand, noticing for the first time the intricate details she had never observed before. The metal had a soft golden hue, and the small stones were arranged in a pattern that seemed to tell a story. That night, Claire arrived at her small second-floor apartment in a simple downtown building. The contrast with the uptown estate her brothers had inherited was stark, but she had always been proud of paying her own rent with her retired teacher's salary. She placed the necklace on her bedroom dresser and watched it for a few minutes before going to sleep. The next morning, the doorbell rang early. Douglas and Bradley were at the door, carrying boxes and smiling exaggeratedly. "Surprise, little sister," said Bradley, walking in uninvited. "We came for a little visit and to show you some of the things we inherited." Douglas placed one of the boxes on the living room table and began taking objects out of it: pearl necklaces, earrings with diamonds, golden rings that gleamed under the light from the window. "Just look at these marvels," he said, picking up a diamond necklace. "This here is worth more than your entire apartment, Claire." Bradley laughed, picking up a ring with an enormous red stone. "And to think you were happy with that trinket. Where is it, by the way? I want to compare it with real jewelry." Claire hesitated for a moment, but ended up going to fetch the necklace from the bedroom. When she returned, her brothers had already spread all the jewelry across the table, creating a veritable showcase of riches. "Put it there in the middle," said Douglas, pointing to a space between two gold necklaces. "Let's see the difference." Claire placed her necklace among the other jewels, and the difference was truly glaring. While the other pieces shone and drew attention, her necklace seemed simple and dull. "See?" said Bradley, shaking his head. "It's like comparing a horse cart to a Ferrari. It doesn't even make sense." Douglas picked up Claire's necklace and examined it closely. "These little stones don't even look real, and this metal, Must be some alloy, not real gold. Are you two finished? Asked Claire, reaching out her hand to take the necklace back. Easy, easy, said Bradley. We're still appreciating your inheritance. It's important to value what you have, isn't it? The two laughed again, but Douglas returned the necklace to his sister. Look, Claire, the two of us talked yesterday and came up with a fair proposal, he said, putting the jewelry back in the box. How about you sell this necklace of yours, and the three of us split the money? That way everything is equal among the siblings. It's not equal, replied Claire, clutching the necklace to her chest. You two have much more than I do. That's exactly why, said Bradley. We're being generous. You could keep all the money from your necklace, but we're offering to share part of our value with you. It's an act of kindness. Claire looked at her brothers with disbelief. Are you serious? Completely, said Douglas. Family is family, right? We have to help each other. If that's the case, why don't you share the real jewelry with me? The question made the two brothers exchange uncomfortable glances. Well, that's different, said Carlos. This jewelry has historical value. It can't be divided. But your necklace, well, it's more symbolic, right? Exactly, agreed Douglas. It's the thought that counts. Claire took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I already said I'm not selling it. This necklace means something to me. Means what? Asked Bradley with an irritated tone. It's a piece of old metal, Claire. You're creating a fantasy in your head. Maybe she needs professional help, whispered Douglas to Bradley, but loud enough for Claire to hear. This attachment to worthless objects isn't normal. Claire felt her face grow hot again. I heard that, Douglas. And it's true, he said, rising from his chair. You're deluding yourself, sister. This necklace is worthless, and you fantasizing that it's special just shows you're not dealing well with reality. Bradley also stood up, helping Douglas carry the boxes. Think about our proposal, Claire, he said at the door. While you cling to trinkets, we're taking care of the family's real estate. After her brothers left, Claire remained seated in the living room for a long time, looking at the necklace in her hands. Could they be right? Was she really deluding herself? That afternoon, she decided to do a little research. She went down to Mr. Arthur's jewelry store on the ground floor of the neighboring building. The man was known in the neighborhood for buying and appraising antique jewelry. Good afternoon, Miss Claire, greeted Arthur, wiping his hands on a cloth. What can I do for you today? I'd like you to take a look at this necklace, she said, placing the piece on the counter. I'd like to know how much it's worth. Arthur picked up the necklace and examined it quickly, without using any special instruments. He murmured, turning the piece over. It seems old, but it's nothing special. The metal isn't pure gold, and these little stones, well, they're nothing but colored glass. Claire's heart sank. Are you sure? Look, Miss Claire, I've been in this business for over 30 years, said Arthur, handing back the necklace. I can offer about $20 for the piece, but it's more out of courtesy than real value. Claire left the jewelry store even more discouraged. Her brothers were right after all. She had built up a fantasy about something that was worthless. She got home and put the necklace away in the dresser drawer, trying to forget the whole situation. 2 days later, she was watering the plants on the balcony when Mrs. Dorothy, the neighbor from the next apartment, came over to chat. Claire, dear, you look downcast, said the lady in her 70s. Did something happen? Oh, Mrs. Dorothy, it's a long story, sighed Claire. I have time, smiled the neighbor, and fresh coffee. The two sat on the balcony, and Claire told the whole story of the inheritance and the humiliation she had gone through. When she mentioned the necklace, Mrs. Dorothy asked to see the piece. Wait just a moment, said Claire, going to fetch the necklace from the drawer. When Mrs. Dorothy saw the necklace, her eyes widened. My goodness, and she murmured, picking up the piece delicately. Claire, where did you say you got this? It was from my grandmother. Why? Mrs. Dorothy turned the necklace over, examining every detail carefully. My dear, I worked as a maid in wealthy homes for 50 years of my life. I've seen many expensive jewels pass through the hands of my employers, she said, her voice serious. And this necklace, it reminds me a lot of the pieces I used to see in the older uptown estates of the city. Claire felt her heart race. What do you mean? I mean that this kind of workmanship, this technique of intertwining the metal threads, not just any jeweler knows how to do it, explained Mrs. Dorothy. And these little stones, they might look simple, but see how they're cut. It's very delicate work. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now continuing. Claire took the necklace back and examined it more closely. There really were details she hadn't noticed before. The metal threads formed a complex pattern, almost like lace woven in gold. And the small stones, even without much shine, had precise and symmetrical cuts. Do you think it could be worth more than I imagined? My dear, I'm not an expert, said Mrs. Dorothy, but if I were you, I'd take this piece to someone who really knows about these things, not a regular jeweler, but an antiques specialist. That night, Claire stayed up researching antique jewelry techniques on the internet. She found images of old necklaces that had similarities to hers, especially in the pattern of intertwined threads. Some sites mentioned that certain 19th century jewelry techniques were considered lost, and that authentic pieces from that era had historical value beyond the value of the materials. The next morning, she called Douglas to share her findings. Hi, Douglas, it's Claire. Hi, sis. Decided to accept our offer. No, actually, I've been researching the necklace and I think it might be older than we thought. Douglas laughed on the other end of the line. Claire, for heaven's sake, are you still on about this fantasy? It's not a fantasy, Douglas. I found information about antique jewelry techniques that are very similar to... Claire, stop, he interrupted. You're deluding yourself again. This necklace isn't worth anything, and you looking for reasons to believe otherwise is only hurting you. But what if... There is no what if, Claire. The reality is you ended up with a piece of junk, and spinning conspiracy theories about it won't change the facts. When Douglas hung up the phone, Claire felt a mix of frustration and determination. She decided she would investigate on her own, even if her brothers thought she was crazy. She searched online for antique experts in the region and found an antiques dealer in a nearby city, about 2 hours away by bus. The problem was, she didn't have money for the trip. Her retiree's pension barely covered basic expenses, and the bus fare, along with the consultation fee, represented a significant expense for her. 2 days later, Douglas and Bradley showed up at her apartment again, this time unannounced. Claire, we need to talk, said Douglas, entering the living room with a serious face. We heard you've been researching this necklace online, said Bradley, crossing his arms. Our cousins mentioned you've been saying you discovered something important. Claire felt exposed. She had indeed mentioned her research to some relatives during a casual phone call. It doesn't hurt to investigate, she said defensively. Yes, it does, retorted Douglas. It costs your mental sanity and our patience. Claire, you're becoming obsessive about this. Bradley sat on the sofa, adopting a friendlier posture. Look, sis, we're worried about you. Since the reading of the will, you haven't been able to accept reality. Looking for value where there is none is only making you suffer. And what if everyone in the family starts thinking you have mental problems? Added Douglas. How will that reflect on our reputation? The insinuation hurt Claire deeply. Are you saying I'm crazy? We're saying you have an unhealthy fixation, said Bradley, and it needs to stop before it gets worse. Douglas approached Claire and put a hand on her shoulder. Here's what we'll do. I'll buy this necklace from you for $100. It's much more than it's worth, but it's a gesture of brotherly affection. You take the money, buy yourself something nice, and we put an end to this story once and for all. Why are you so eager for me to get rid of the necklace? Asked Claire suspiciously. The two brothers exchanged a quick glance before Douglas answered. Because we want you to stop suffering over something that doesn't matter. And because it's becoming embarrassing for the family, added Bradley. People are starting to comment that you didn't take the inheritance well. Claire felt her anger growing inside. So you're worried about what people will think? We're worried about you, said Douglas, but his tone didn't sound sincere. And yes, we also worry about the family's image. These things go hand in hand. Bradley got up from the sofa. Claire, I'll be direct. If you continue with this obsession over the necklace and spreading crazy theories about it having value, We'll have to take measures. What kind of measures? Cut off any help you might eventually need from the family, said Douglas, and make it clear to all the relatives that you're going through emotional difficulties. The threat was clear. Claire felt the ground give way beneath her feet. Although she could support herself, she knew that in emergencies she had always counted on the support of her more prosperous brothers. And the idea of being labelled as mentally unstable to the whole family was terrifying. You would really do that to me? We hope it won't be necessary, said Bradley, walking toward the door. The choice is yours, Claire. Do you want peace in the family, or do you want to continue with this fantasy? After the siblings left, Claire remained seated in the living room for hours, looking at the necklace in her hands. The emotional pressure was intense. Part of her wanted to give up, sell the necklace, and return to a normal life. But another part, a small but persistent voice, whispered that there was something more to that story. The following week, she made a decision that would change everything. She sold some of her few valuable possessions, a ring that had belonged to her mother, a small stereo she rarely used, and some old books she had kept for years. With the money raised, she bought a bus ticket to the nearby city and scheduled an appointment with the antique dealer she had found online. During the 2-hour trip, her heart raced. What if her siblings were right? What if she was really deluding herself? But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about that necklace, something that went beyond monetary value. On the bus, she sat next to a well-dressed lady carrying a briefcase full of papers. "Excuse my curiosity," said the lady, noticing Claire nervously fidgeting with a small box. "But are you taking something to be appraised?" Claire hesitated, but ended up telling part of the story to the stranger. "How interesting," said the woman, introducing herself as Professor Eleanor from the city's Metropolitan Museum of Art. "I've worked with exhibitions for over 20 years. May I take a look at the piece?" Carefully, Claire opened the little box and showed the necklace to the professor. Eleanor held the piece delicately, examining it closely. Her expression gradually changed from casual curiosity to professional interest. "This type of intertwining," she murmured. "I've seen this technique before, but it's extremely rare. Do you really think it could have value?" "Well, I'm not a jewelry expert," said Eleanor, carefully returning the necklace. "But I organized an exhibition on 19th century European jewelry a few years ago, and there were pieces with techniques very similar to this. The workmanship is definitely high-end artisanal." Claire's heart raced. "European?" "Yes, specifically from regions that are now part of Austria and Germany. There were families of jewelers who developed very specific techniques, almost like signatures, but that was over a century ago." For the rest of the trip, Professor Eleanor explained about the different schools of European jewelry, and Claire absorbed every piece of information like a sponge. When they reached their destination, the professor gave her card to Claire. "If you discover anything interesting about this piece, let me know. I would be fascinated to learn more about its history." The antique shop was in the city's historic downtown, in an old building with windows full of curious objects. The owner, Mr. Bernard, was a man of about 60, with a magnifying glass hanging around his neck and hands stained from handling so many old pieces. "So, Miss Claire, tell me about this piece you've brought," he said, leading her to a table at the back of the shop, full of appraisal instruments. Claire told the whole story of the inheritance, trying not to mention her siblings' disbelief so as not to influence the appraisal. Bernard listened attentively while examining the necklace with different magnifying glasses and instruments. Interesting," he murmured, adjusting his glasses. "Very interesting. Can you tell me anything?" Bernard continued examining the piece in silence for a few more minutes. Then he placed the instruments on the table and looked directly at Claire. "Miss Claire, I need a few days to do more detailed research. This piece has characteristics that caught my attention, and I want to consult some specialized catalogues before giving a definitive opinion. But can you give me an initial impression? I can say it is definitely not a common piece. The workmanship is of the highest quality, and some techniques I see here haven't been used for decades," he explained. "As for the value, well, that will depend on the provenance and authenticity." "And how long do you need, sir?" "About 3 or 4 days. And look, I'll be honest with you, ma'am. I'm sufficiently intrigued to not charge for the appraisal. It's the kind of piece that sparks my professional curiosity. Claire left the store with a mix of anxiety and hope. For the first time, someone was treating her necklace with seriousness, instead of simply dismissing it as worthless. During the trip back, she couldn't stop thinking about the expression of genuine interest on Bernard's face, and about Professor Eleanor's words on European jewelry. Could her grandmother really have left something special for her? When she got home, she found a message on the phone. It was Douglas. "Claire, I heard you left town today. I hope you didn't do anything foolish. Call me when you get back." She didn't return the call. For the first time in weeks, she felt she had the right to keep secrets from her siblings. The next day, she woke up to the doorbell ringing insistently. It was Bradley, and by the expression on his face, he was not at all happy. "Claire, what's this story about you going to consult an antiquarian yesterday? How did you know?" "The city isn't that big, sister. I have contacts everywhere, and it so happens I've known Bernard for years." Claire felt her stomach turn to ice. "So what? So what is that he called me last night? Curious to know more about your family's history," said Bradley, entering the apartment uninvited. "It seems your necklace really piqued his interest." "And that's bad?" Bradley sat in the living room with an expression that mixed irritation and something Claire couldn't identify. Could it be nervousness? "It's bad because you're creating unrealistic expectations, Claire, and worse, you're doing it publicly. Bernard has already mentioned to other merchants in the area that he has an intriguing piece to appraise." "Why does that bother you so much?" "Because when it comes to nothing, as it always does, you'll look foolish in front of everyone," replied Bradley, but there was something forced in his tone. "And we, as a family, will share that embarrassment." Claire watched him carefully. For the first time, she had the impression that her brother was more worried than angry. "Bradley, are you afraid of something?" "What would I be afraid of?" He laughed, but the laughter sounded false. "Afraid of you being disappointed? Maybe." At that moment, the phone rang. It was Bernard. "Ms. Claire, I need you to come here as soon as possible. I've made some discoveries about your necklace that need to be discussed in person." "Good discoveries or bad ones?" "Come and we'll talk. But I can say that I've never seen anything like it in 30 years in the business." When Claire hung up the phone, Bradley was pale. "What did he say?" "That I need to go there today." Bradley stood up quickly. "I'm coming with you." "Why?" Because I'm your brother, and I want to support you in this discovery," he said. But there was an urgency in his voice that didn't match his words. "No, thank you. I prefer to go alone." "Claire, don't be stubborn. You don't understand anything about antique appraisals. You could easily be fooled." Bradley's insistence confirmed Claire's suspicions. There was something he wasn't saying. "If you're so concerned about my well-being, why weren't you concerned when I only received the necklace in the inheritance?" Bradley was speechless for a few seconds. That was different." "Different how?" "Look, Claire, let's not fight about this. Let me go with you, and that way we can sort everything out at once." "No." The firm refusal seemed to leave Bradley desperate. Okay. But at least promise me you'll tell me everything you find out." "I promise I'll tell you if I find out anything relevant." After Bradley left, Claire kept thinking about his change in behavior. For the first time, she had the impression that the brothers knew more about the necklace than they were admitting. But why would they hide information about something they considered worthless? The trip back to the antiquarian city was even more tense than the first. Claire couldn't stop creating scenarios in her mind. What had Bernard discovered? Why was Bradley so nervous? The antique shop was closed when she arrived, but Bernard was waiting for her. He quickly led her to the back of the store, where he had set up a sort of makeshift laboratory with powerful magnifying glasses, precision scales, and open old books. "Miss Claire, please have a seat," he said with a seriousness she had never seen in the first consultation. "Did something happen?" Bernard picked up the necklace, which was carefully resting on black velvet. "This necklace is not what it appears to be," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "And certainly not what you imagine it to be." Claire's heart raced. I don't understand. Bernard turned the necklace over, pointing to some tiny marks on the back. Do you see these small marks here? They are the jeweler's signatures. I consulted several catalogues and found references to this specific signature. And what did you find? That this signature belonged to an Austrian jeweler named Heinrich Goldmann, who worked in Vienna between 1860 and 1890. He was known for creating exclusive pieces for European royalty and high nobility. Claire felt the room spin around her. Royalty? Not only that, Bernard continued, picking up one of the books. The techniques I identified in this necklace were secrets of the Goldmann family. They never taught their methods to other jewelers, which means each of their pieces is unique and identifiable. But it means this necklace was made specifically for someone very important over a century ago. And considering the quality of the materials and the work involved, well, the historical value could be immeasurable. Claire had to lean on the chair to keep from falling. Mr. Bernard, are you sure about this? I am sure of the authenticity and provenance, he said, but I need more information about how your grandmother obtained this piece. The story behind it may be as valuable as the necklace itself. My grandmother never spoke about the family's past. That is exactly what needs to be investigated, said Bernard, closing the books. Ms. Claire, I'll be very frank. This necklace could be worth a fortune, but it could also be an important historical piece that belongs in some museum or private collection. What do you mean? I mean that before we establish any value, we need to find out how it came to your family, and for that, I suggest we seek specialized help. Bernard explained that he had a contact at a state university, a professor specializing in European art and jewelry, who could do a more in-depth appraisal. He offered to schedule the appointment and even pay for the trip. Why would you do that? Because in 30 years of profession, I have never come across a piece so intriguing, he said, his eyes shining. If my suspicions are correct, this necklace could rewrite part of the history of jewels that left Europe during the wars. When Claire returned home, her mind was in a whirlwind. With each revelation, she felt she was moving further from the reality she knew and closer to something much larger than she had imagined. She decided not to tell the brothers anything until she had more concrete information. But her decision was tested the next morning when she woke up to someone knocking insistently on the door. It was Douglas and Bradley, and this time they were accompanied by 2 more people, their wives. Claire, we need to have a serious talk, said Douglas, entering the room followed by the others, and this time we brought reinforcements. Hi, sis-in-law, said Jennifer, Douglas's wife. We're worried about you. It's true, agreed Cynthia, Bradley's wife. The boys told us about your obsession with this necklace. Claire felt surrounded. What obsession? I'm just trying to understand what I inherited. Douglas stepped forward. Claire, Bradley told me you went to the antique shop again yesterday, and that the man said he discovered things about the necklace. He did. What exactly? Claire hesitated. She had promised herself she wouldn't say anything until she was sure, but the group's pressure was intense. That it might be an important historical piece. The reaction was immediate. Douglas and Bradley exchanged a look Claire couldn't decipher. Historical how? Asked Bradley, trying to keep his voice casual. From a famous 19th century jeweler. Claire, dear, interjected Jennifer, sitting next to her on the sofa. Don't you think you're getting carried away by emotion? These antique dealers sometimes make up stories to increase the value of items. That's right, agreed Cynthia. It could be a scam. I've heard of people doing that to sell expensive appraisals. Douglas moved closer to Claire. Listen, sis, let's suppose this necklace really has some historical value. Have you stopped to think about the legal implications? Legal? Of course. If it was stolen or left Europe illegally, you could have serious problems. Possession of a historical object without proper documentation is a crime in several countries. Bradley completed his brother's thought. And if it's really valuable, how are you going to prove it's rightfully yours? Do you have documentation? Proof of purchase? Any paper showing how Grandma got this piece? The questions hit Claire like punches. She really had no documentation about the necklace's origin. But it's in Grandma's will. "The will proves she left you the necklace," said Douglas. "It doesn't prove she had the legal right to possess it." Cynthia leaned forward. "Claire, imagine if they discover this necklace was stolen from some museum decades ago. You could be arrested as a receiver of stolen goods. Or worse," added Jennifer. "Imagine if they discover it belonged to some noble family that died in the war. The descendants could sue you for millions." Claire felt the ground open beneath her feet. She hadn't thought of any of these possibilities. Bradley sat on the other side of the sofa, making Claire feel even more cornered. "Sis, we don't want you to have problems. That's why we're here." "We want to help you," said Douglas, "and the best way to do that is to keep you from getting into a mess. What do you suggest?" The four exchanged glances as if they had rehearsed that moment. "That you stop this investigation now," said Jennifer, "before it's too late. And discreetly get rid of the necklace," added Cynthia, "to avoid future problems." Claire looked at them suspiciously. "You want me to throw away a piece that could be historical?" "We want you to protect yourself," said Bradley. "If it really is historical, then it's not yours, and keeping it could cause you serious trouble. Besides," said Douglas, standing up, "we as a family could also be harmed. If you get sued or arrested, our reputation goes with you." The implicit threat was clear. Claire felt a mix of fear and anger. "So you're more worried about your reputation than about me?" "We're worried about both," said Jennifer, "and that's why we came to talk as a family, to find a solution that protects everyone." Douglas took an envelope from his pocket. "We've made a financial proposal, Claire. It's here in writing." "What proposal?" "We're buying the necklace from you for $5,000, he said, handing over the envelope. "It's much more than any jeweler would pay, and this way you avoid any future legal trouble." Claire looked at the envelope without taking it. $5,000 for a piece that could be worth a fortune. "It could be worth a fortune. It could be worth nothing," said Bradley. "But $5,000 is guaranteed money with no headache." "And no risk," added Cynthia. Claire stood up from the sofa, feeling suffocated by the group's pressure. "I need to think." "There's not much to think about," said Douglas, leaving the envelope on the table. "It's a fair and generous offer." "And temporary," added Bradley. "If you take too long to decide, we might reconsider the amount." After the four of them left, Claire stared at the envelope on the table for a long time. $5,000 was a lot of money for her, almost 6 months of her pension. It would be enough to pay off some debts and still have a reserve for emergencies. But something about the attitude of her siblings and in-laws didn't make sense. If they truly believed the necklace was worthless, why would they offer $5,000 for it? And why did they seem so desperate for her to stop the investigation? That night, she made a decision. She called Bernard and accepted his proposal to consult the expert at the State University. Regardless of the risks her siblings had mentioned, she needed to know the truth about her inheritance. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The trip to the State University took almost 4 hours. Bernard had managed to schedule an appointment with Professor Thomas Sterling, a specialist in 18th and 19th century European art and jewellery. The university was in a larger city, and Claire had never been on such a large campus. "Don't be intimidated by the academic setting," said Bernard, carrying a folder full of documents as they walked through the corridors. "Professor Thomas is a very approachable person." The professor's office was a veritable treasure trove of historical artifacts. The walls were covered with shelves full of old books, and there were display cases with replicas of famous jewellery scattered throughout the room. Professor Thomas, a man of about 50 with a greying beard and thick-framed glasses, greeted them enthusiastically. "So this is the famous piece that piqued Bernard's curiosity," he said after the introductions. "May I examine it?" Claire carefully handed over the necklace, watching as the professor placed it under a high-powered magnifying glass connected to a monitor. The magnified image of the necklace appeared on the screen, revealing details impossible to see with the naked eye. "Magnificent," murmured the professor, adjusting the focus of the magnifier. "Absolutely magnificent. Do you recognize anything?" "I recognize the technique, the quality of the workmanship, and especially..." He paused, zooming in further on the image of the back of the necklace. These marks here. On the screen, the small marks Bernard had identified appeared clear and precise. "There is no doubt," said the professor, looking at Claire seriously. "This is an authentic piece by Heinrich Goldmann." Bernard had already mentioned that name. "Yes, but now I can confirm with absolute certainty. Look here," he pointed to the screen. "This specific mark only appears on the most exclusive pieces Goldmann made for the Austrian imperial family." Claire felt her legs go weak. Imperial family? Exactly. Between 1870 and 1880, Heinrich Goldmann was the official jeweler to the Austrian court. He created unique pieces for special occasions: weddings, coronations, peace treaties. Each piece was an individual work of art. The professor stepped away from the magnifying glass and went to a bookshelf, from where he took a thick, old book. "Here," he said, opening the book to a marked page. "Catalogue of the Austrian court jewels. Look at this description here." Claire and Bernard leaned in to read. The text was in German, but there was an English translation beside it. The description spoke of a necklace commissioned in 1875 for Archduchess Maria Theresa on the occasion of her engagement to an Italian prince. "But how can you be sure it's the same necklace?" "Because the description matches exactly what we are seeing," explained the professor. "The interlacing pattern, the number of stones, even the specific arrangement of the decorative elements, and most importantly, the hidden signature that Goldmann placed only on the imperial pieces." Bernard let out a low whistle. "Professor, does this mean that—" "It means this piece should not be here," said Thomas with a serious expression. "According to historical records, the entire jewelry collection of Archduchess Maria Theresa disappeared during the First World War." Claire's heart raced. Disappeared how? The noble families, when they realized they were going to lose everything in the war, tried to save what they could. Many treasures were hidden, buried, or secretly sent to other countries. Some pieces were never found again. And this necklace could be one of them? Not only could it be, it probably is. "The question now is to find out how it came to your family," said the professor, looking directly at Claire. "Did your grandmother ever mention anything about her origins, about her family?" "Never. She always changed the subject when we asked." Thomas closed the book and leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Claire, I need to ask a delicate question. Was your grandmother really from the United States, or did she come from another country? I always thought she was from the United States, but actually I never saw any of her documents, and she had a different accent which we thought was just from being from the countryside." "What kind of accent?" "Kind of sing-songy with some words pronounced strangely. My siblings always joked that she talked like characters from old movies." The professor and Bernard exchanged a look. "Ms. Claire, it's possible your grandmother was of European origin," said Thomas, "and if it is what I suspect, your family may have a much more complex history than you imagined." "What do you suspect?" "That your grandmother may have been a descendant or even a relative of the Austrian imperial family, and that this necklace came to her through a legitimate lineage." The revelation was like a bolt of lightning. Claire needed to sit down. But is that possible? During and after the First World War, many members of the European nobility fled to other countries, including the United States. Some changed their identities, hid their origins, and tried to start a new life. It was a matter of survival. Bernard leaned forward. "Professor, would that mean the necklace is legitimate? That she has the right to possess it?" "If my theory is correct, yes. But we will need to do a very detailed genealogical research to prove it, and also a more in-depth analysis of the necklace's materials." Thomas explained that it would be necessary to examine the stones individually, verify the purity of the gold, and compare them with the technical specifications from the historical records. He offered to do all the work free of charge, in exchange for the opportunity to study such a rare piece. "How long would this take?" "A few weeks, maybe a month, but I can say in advance that, if my suspicions are confirmed, this piece has an incalculable value. Not just monetary, but historical and cultural." Claire left the university with her head spinning. The information was too much to process at once. All her life she had considered herself an ordinary person from a simple family, and now she discovered she might have royal blood running in her veins. On the way back, Bernard couldn't stop talking about the possibilities. "Claire, do you realize what this means? If the professor is right, you're not just the owner of a valuable piece of jewelry. You could be a legitimate descendant of European royalty." "But that doesn't change who I am," she replied, still trying to process everything. "It doesn't change who you are on the inside," agreed Bernard, "but it could completely change your circumstances. This piece could be worth millions, Claire. Millions." When she got home, she found Douglas and Bradley waiting at the building's entrance. By the expressions on their faces, they were not at all happy. "Where have you been?" asked Douglas as soon as she got out of Bernard's car. "Taking care of personal matters." "Personal matters related to the necklace?" Claire didn't answer, but the response was written all over her face. Bradley stepped closer. "Claire, you need to stop this. Today." "Why?" "Because the whole town is talking about you," said Douglas. "People are starting to comment that you're investigating a mysterious inheritance." "And it's embarrassing the whole family," added Bradley. Claire observed them carefully. There was something different in their attitude. It wasn't just irritation or concern anymore. It was fear. "What are you afraid of?" "Afraid?" laughed Douglas, but the laugh sounded forced. "We're not afraid of anything. We're worried about you." "And about the consequences of your fantasies," said Bradley. Claire decided to test a theory. "And what if they're not fantasies? What if the necklace is really worth a fortune?" The brothers' reaction was immediate. Douglas paled and Bradley took a step back. "That's impossible," said Douglas, but his voice trembled. "Why is it impossible?" Bradley tried to regain his composure. Because if it were valuable, Grandma would have told us, or at least she would have left some indication in the will." "Maybe she did," said Claire, watching their reactions. "Maybe she knew exactly what she was doing when she left the necklace specifically to me." Douglas and Bradley exchanged a look that confirmed all of Claire's suspicions. "You know something," she said, her tone accusatory. "You've known from the beginning." "We don't know anything," said Bradley, but he was visibly sweating. "Then why are you so nervous?" Douglas tried to regain control of the situation. "Claire, I'm making one last offer. $10,000 for the necklace. It's my final offer." "10,000? Yesterday it was 5,000. "It's because we want to help more." Claire laughed for the first time in weeks. "You're scared, really scared." "Scared of what?" "That I'll find out what the necklace is really worth, and mostly that I'll find out what you know about it." Bradley exploded. "All right, that's enough, Claire. You have no idea what you're getting into. This necklace could bring problems you can't even imagine." "What kind of problems?" "Problems that could destroy the whole family," said Douglas, completely losing his composure. "If you keep digging into this, you might discover things that are better left buried." The inadvertent confession made Claire's blood run cold. "What things?" The brothers realized they had said too much. Douglas tried to backtrack. "Look, Claire, they're not bad things. They're just complicated." "Complicated how?" Bradley took a deep breath. "Grandma made us promise we would never talk about the necklace's origin. She said it was to protect the family." "Protect from what?" "From people who might want to take what's ours," said Douglas, "or from authorities who might not understand how it came to her." Claire was finally getting to the truth. "Did you know from the start that the necklace had value?" The brothers were silent for a long moment. Then Bradley nodded. "We knew it wasn't an ordinary piece." "And you let me go through all this humiliation? You let me feel like a fool for weeks?" "It was to protect you," said Douglas. "Grandma left very clear instructions. The necklace should be kept hidden without drawing attention. When you started investigating, we became desperate." "Desperate? Why?" Bradley looked around as if afraid of being overheard. "Because Grandma said that if anyone discovered the truth about the necklace, our family could lose everything. Not just the necklace, but all the other things she left us." "That doesn't make sense." "It does," said Douglas. "If the necklace was really stolen or smuggled, as we suspect, the authorities could confiscate all of Grandma's estate, including the house and the other jewels we inherited." The revelation hit Claire like a punch. "You think the necklace was stolen?" "We don't know for sure," said Bradley, "but Grandma was always very mysterious about her past, and sometimes when she drank too much at family parties, she would say strange things about hidden treasures and secrets that would die with her." Douglas added, "Once when I was little I heard her talking on the phone in a language that wasn't English. It sounded like German or something similar." The puzzle pieces were fitting together in Claire's mind. Her grandmother really had hidden important information about the family. "And you never tried to find out the truth?" "We tried at first," admitted Bradley. "But Grandma was furious when she realized. She said if we kept asking questions, she would disinherit everyone and donate everything to charity." "So you gave up?" "We decided it was better not to stir things up," said Douglas, "for everyone's sake." Claire stared at them with a mix of anger and disappointment. "And when you saw I was investigating, you preferred to humiliate me rather than tell me the truth." "We wanted to protect you," repeated Bradley, but without conviction. "You wanted to protect yourselves," corrected Claire, "afraid of losing your inheritances." The brothers did not deny it. That night, Claire stayed up late, rethinking the entire conversation. She finally understood her brother's strange behavior. They weren't afraid that she would discover the necklace was worthless. They were afraid she would discover it was worth too much, and if Professor Thomas's suspicions were correct, the necklace wasn't just valuable. It was a legitimate historical piece, inherited through a family lineage that traced back to European royalty. That meant the brothers were wrong about one thing. If the necklace were confiscated, it would be for its historical value, not for being stolen. And in that case, she could be entitled to substantial compensation. Or even better, if she could prove the family lineage, she could keep the necklace and still discover more about her true past. The next morning, she called Professor Thomas. "Professor, I'd like to accelerate the research. I've discovered some important information about my family." "What kind of information?" "Suspicions that my grandmother was really of European origin, possibly Austrian, and that she knew much more about the necklace than she let on." "Excellent. That could make our investigation much easier. Can you come here this week?" "I can. And, Professor, is it possible to do everything confidentially, without drawing attention?" "Of course. Why?" "Because I've discovered that other people are also interested in the outcome of this research." When she hung up the phone, Claire felt for the first time that she was in control of the situation. Her brothers had tried to manipulate her for weeks, but now she had all the information she needed. And if her suspicions were correct, soon she would be the one with cards up her sleeve to play. The second trip to the university was different from the first. This time, Claire carried a small suitcase with some personal items that had belonged to her grandmother, old photographs, documents she had found stored away, and even some letters written in an elegant handwriting she had never been able to fully decipher. Professor Thomas received her in his private laboratory, a space even more impressive than his office. There were analysis equipment that seemed straight out of science fiction movies, and a team of graduate students working on different projects. "Ms. Claire, did you bring the materials you mentioned?" "I brought everything I found," she said, opening the suitcase. "I hope it helps." Thomas began by examining the photographs. They were old black-and-white portraits, some dated from the early 20th century. In one photo, a young, elegant woman wore a necklace that looked identical to the one Claire had inherited. "Is this your grandmother?" "No, this photo is older. By the date written on the back, it's from 1920. My grandmother was born in 1925. "Then this could be your grandmother's mother or an aunt," murmured Thomas, examining the photo with a magnifying glass. "And look, she is wearing the necklace. You mean it was already in the family for over a century? At least that. Let's see what else we have here." Thomas examined the documents carefully. Most were in English, but there were some papers with text in German and French. "These documents are fascinating," he said after a few minutes. "They appear to be travel records, dates of entry into the United States and—" Wait a moment. He focused on a specific document, comparing it with information in one of his books. "Miss Claire, this document here is an immigration record from 1923, and the name that appears here is Maria Theresia von Habsburg. Claire felt her heart stop. Habsburg, the Austrian imperial family, and Maria Theresia. If my suspicions are correct, this may be the real name of your great-grandmother. Thomas continued examining the documents, taking notes and cross-referencing information in different books. With each discovery, his expression grew more serious. "Professor, what are you finding?" "I'm finding that your family has an extraordinary history," he said, looking directly at her. "If these documents are authentic, your great-grandmother was an Austrian archduchess who fled to the United States during the fall of the empire." "But is that possible?" "Not only is it possible, it makes perfect sense. During and after the First World War, many members of the Austrian nobility scattered around the world. Some went to the United States, others to Argentina, and some came here." Thomas showed Claire a genealogy of the Habsburg family he was consulting. "Look here. Maria Theresia von Habsburg, born in 1898, disappeared from official records in 1922. If she is the same person from this immigration document, she would have arrived in the United States at age 25. And the necklace? The necklace would be part of her personal dowry, the jewels she managed to bring in her escape. It was common for noble families to convert their wealth into portable jewels when they needed to flee. Claire tried to absorb all the information. "So I am..." "You are potentially the great-granddaughter of an Austrian archduchess," said Thomas, "which makes you a legitimate descendant of the House of Habsburg." The revelation was overwhelming. Claire needed to sit down. "But then, why did my grandmother hide this from us?" "Probably for safety," explained Thomas. "In the 1920s and 1930s, there was a lot of political persecution. Revealing European noble origins could attract unwanted attention. It was safer to assume a completely new identity." "And now? What does this mean for me?" Thomas leaned back in his chair. "It means you have a legitimate right to the necklace, with no legal question. It has belonged to your family for generations. But it also means you may have a right to other things." "What other things?" "Properties, titles, other valuable items that could be scattered around the world. The House of Habsburg had holdings in several countries, and not everything was lost or confiscated. Thomas explained that it would be necessary to conduct a more in-depth genealogical research to confirm all the family connections. But the documents Claire had brought were very strong evidence of her noble lineage. Regarding the necklace specifically, I need to finish analyzing the materials, but I can say that the stones are genuine and of exceptional quality." "What would its value be?" "If my analyses are confirmed, we're talking about at least $2 million, possibly much more depending on the interest from collectors and museums. $2 million. The amount was so surreal that Claire couldn't process it immediately. "Professor, I need to keep this information confidential for now." "Of course, but may I ask why?" Claire told him about her brother's attitude, about the attempts to buy the necklace, and about the revelations from the previous night. "I understand perfectly," said Thomas. "It's a delicate situation. My advice is that you complete our research before revealing anything. That way you'll have all the information and documentation needed to protect yourself." "How much time do you need?" 2 weeks at most. "And I'll arrange for all the official documentation that proves your discoveries." Claire returned home with her mind racing. In just a few days, her life had been completely transformed. From a retired teacher, humiliated by her brothers, she had become a descendant of an archduchess and an heiress to a fortune. But she also knew the coming days would be crucial. Her brothers wouldn't give up easily, and she would need to be very careful about how she revealed her discoveries. When she arrived at her building, she found an unpleasant surprise. Douglas and Bradley were talking with the doorman, clearly trying to get information about her comings and goings. "Hi, Claire," said Douglas, trying to sound casual. "We were waiting for you." "What for?" "To talk about our latest offer," said Bradley. "Have you thought about the $10,000? Claire looked at them with a new perspective. Now she knew her brothers were trying to buy for $10,000 something worth at least 200 times more. "I'm still thinking." "Don't take too long," said Douglas. "The offer might not last forever." "Why the rush?" Bradley and Douglas exchanged a glance. "Because we're worried about you," said Bradley. "The longer you take to resolve this, the more obsessive you become. And the more problems you could create for the whole family," added Douglas. Claire decided to test how far they were willing to go. "And if I don't want to sell?" "Then we'll have to take more drastic measures," said Douglas, in a threatening tone. "What kind of measures?" "We've already spoken with the family lawyer," said Bradley. "There are legal ways to question the mental sanity of someone who is making decisions harmful to themselves." The threat was clear. Claire felt a mix of fear and anger. "Are you threatening me with conservatorship?" "We're offering help before it becomes necessary to take extreme measures," said Douglas. Claire took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'll think about your offer." "You have 1 week," said Bradley. "After that, we can't guarantee the situation won't get complicated." After her brothers left, Claire went up to her apartment with her heart racing. The situation was escalating quickly, and she needed to speed up her research. She called Professor Thomas. "Professor, I need to accelerate our investigation. The situation here is getting complicated." "What happened?" "My brothers are making more serious threats. They talk about questioning my mental sanity if I don't sell them the necklace." "That is serious, Miss Claire. I will prioritize our research. I can have preliminary results by the end of this week." "Thank you, Professor. I need ammunition to defend myself." "You'll have all the ammunition you need. A legitimate descendant of the House of Habsburg does not go unprotected while I'm involved in the case." In the following days, Claire lived in constant tension. Her brothers called daily, pressing for an answer. Her sisters-in-law showed up for courtesy visits that were actually attempts at persuasion. And some distant cousins began calling, clearly influenced by the brothers, suggesting she was needing help. The psychological pressure was intense, but Claire remained firm. She knew she was about to discover the full truth about her inheritance, and that gave her strength to resist. On Friday, the phone rang. It was Thomas. "Ms. Claire, I've finished the analysis. You need to come here urgently. The findings are even more extraordinary than we imagined. I can come today." "Come, and bring a trusted witness. What I'm going to show you needs to be properly documented." Claire called Mrs. Dorothy, her neighbor, who had been the first person to suspect the necklace's value. "Mrs. Dorothy, could you accompany me on an important trip today?" "Of course, my dear. Did something happen? I'm about to discover the truth about my inheritance." The trip to the university was tense. Claire felt her life was about to change definitively, but she didn't know exactly how. Professor Thomas greeted them in his laboratory with an expression of contained excitement. There were documents scattered on the table, and the necklace was positioned under a high-powered microscope. "Ladies, prepare yourselves for some extraordinary revelations," he said, indicating chairs. "I'll start with the technical analysis of the necklace." Thomas explained that the necklace's stones were genuine gems of exceptional quality, diamonds, rubies, and sapphires that had been cut with specific 19th century techniques. The gold was of a purity rarely seen in commercial jewelry, and there were technical details that definitively confirmed the work of Heinrich Goldman. "But the most important discovery is here," he said, pointing to the microscope. "Look." Claire looked through the microscope and saw a tiny inscription engraved on the inner part of the necklace, invisible to the naked eye. "To my dear Maria Theresia, with eternal love. Franz Joseph." "Franz Joseph was the Emperor of Austria," explained Thomas, "and Maria Theresia was—" "My great-grandmother," completed Claire, feeling tears in her eyes. "Exactly. This necklace was a personal gift from the Emperor to your great-grandmother. That makes it not just a historical piece, but a unique imperial artifact." Thomas showed the documents he had prepared, genealogical certificates, historical confirmations, and detailed technical appraisals. "Miss Claire, I can officially confirm that you are the great-granddaughter of Maria Theresia von Habsburg, Archduchess of Austria. And this necklace is yours by legitimate hereditary right. What would its value be now?" "For a private collector, between $5 and $10 million. For a museum, the historical value would be incalculable. But considering the imperial provenance, well, it's hard to estimate. It could be one of the most important pieces of Austrian jewelry still in existence. Mrs. Dorothy held Claire's hand. "My dear, do you realize what this means?" Claire was in shock. In a few weeks, she had gone from a humiliated heir to a descendant of an archduchess and the owner of one of the most valuable jewels in the world. "Professor, can you document all of this officially?" "I already have. I have here a complete report with all the technical analyses, genealogical confirmations, and value appraisals. This document is internationally recognized by gemological institutes and art museums." Thomas handed Claire a folder full of official documents. "With this in hand, you have absolute legal protection over the necklace. No one can question or threaten you." On the trip back, Claire and Mrs. Dorothy could barely speak. The reality was too surreal to be absorbed quickly. "Claire, what are you going to do now?" asked Mrs. Dorothy. "First, I'm going to protect myself from my brother's threats," said Claire, clutching the document folder. Then I'll decide what to do with a $10 million inheritance." When they arrived at the building, they found Douglas and Bradley waiting at the door. By the expressions on their faces, they weren't in the mood for games. "Claire, where have you been?" asked Douglas with an aggressive tone. "Taking care of personal matters." "What matters?" asked Bradley, noticing the folder Claire was carrying. "Matters related to my inheritance." The brothers exchanged nervous glances. "Claire, it's been a week," said Douglas. "We want an answer about our proposal." "I have an answer," said Claire, feeling a confidence she had never experienced before. "And what is it?" "The answer is no. I'm not selling the necklace." Bradley took a step forward. "Then we'll have to move to Plan B." "What Plan B?" Douglas pulled some papers from his pocket. "We've already filed a petition questioning your mental capacity. We claim you're making decisions harmful to yourself due to a pathological obsession. And we have witnesses who will testify about your erratic behavior over the last few weeks," added Bradley. Claire smiled for the first time in a long while. "Interesting. Because I have some documents here you'll want to see." "What documents?" Claire opened the folder and took out Professor Thomas's official report. "Documents that prove the necklace you consider a trinket is worth between $5 and $10 million. The brothers' reaction was instant. Douglas turned completely pale, and Bradley had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. That's impossible," stammered Douglas. "It's very possible, and there's more." Claire took out the genealogical documents. "I also have here proof that I am the legitimate descendant of the Austrian royal house. The necklace belonged to my great-grandmother, the Archduchess Maria Theresia von Habsburg." Bradley had to sit down on the curb. "It can't be. It can and is. The necklace was a personal gift from Emperor Franz Joseph. It's one of the most important pieces of imperial jewelry still in existence." Douglas tried to regain his composure. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. Grandma's will is still valid, and we still have our inheritances." "True," agreed Claire. "You keep the house and the other jewels, which compared to my inheritance are crumbs." "Claire, let's talk calmly," said Bradley, clearly desperate. "We're family. We can reach an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" "Well, considering we've discovered the necklace is valuable, perhaps we should revise the division of the inheritance," suggested Douglas. "Revise how?" "Divide the value of the necklace among the 3 siblings," said Bradley. "After all, we're all Grandma's grandchildren." Claire laughed out loud. "You spent weeks humiliating me, calling me crazy, threatening me with guardianship, and now you want to split my inheritance?" "But it's fair," insisted Douglas. "If we had known its real value, the division would have been different." "If you had known?" Claire raised her voice. "You knew from the start the necklace wasn't ordinary. Grandma had left you instructions about it, remember?" The brothers were speechless. "Besides," Claire continued, "you had every opportunity to investigate the necklace when you inherited the other things, but you chose to assume it was worthless and leave me with the crumbs." Mrs. Dorothy, who had watched the entire discussion in silence, spoke up. "Boys, you've reaped what you sowed. You treated your sister with contempt, and now you want to share in her discovery." Douglas tried one last gambit. "Claire, let's forget everything that happened. We're family. Let's split everything equally and move on." No, said Claire firmly. I won't forget. You've shown me who you really are these past few weeks, and you don't deserve anything of what I've discovered. Bradley stood up, angry. You'll regret this, Claire. We'll contest the will. We'll prove there were irregularities. Contest all you want, replied Claire, showing the official documents. I have legal proof here that the necklace is mine by hereditary right dating back over a century. No court in the world will take it from me. Douglas made a final attempt. What if I offer $1 million for the necklace? No. $2 million? No. How much do you want? I don't want to sell the necklace, said Claire. It will stay in the family, in my part of the family. The brothers finally understood they had completely lost control of the situation. With no more arguments, they walked away in silence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following weeks, news of the discovery spread through the city. At first, Claire tried to be discreet, but the story was too fascinating to remain a secret. Soon, local journalists began seeking her out, interested in the story of the retired teacher who discovered she was a descendant of an archduchess. Professor Thomas became a constant consultant, helping Claire navigate the legal and historical complexities of her discovery. He explained that besides the necklace, she might have rights to other Habsburg family assets scattered around the world. Miss Claire, I received an interesting proposal today, he said during a phone call. What kind of proposal? The Vienna Imperial History Museum wants to get in touch with you. They have other pieces from the personal collection of Archduchess Maria Theresia and would like to bring everything together in a special exhibition. Do they want to buy my necklace? Not necessarily. They're proposing a temporary loan with payment of exhibition rights. You would retain ownership but would allow the piece to be displayed alongside other jewels of your great-grandmother. The proposal was tempting. Claire had always dreamed of visiting Europe, and now she had a historical reason to travel. Professor, would I need to go there? If you wanted, you would be received as a guest of honor. They would pay all travel expenses and even offer a personalized tour of the places where your great-grandmother lived. While Claire considered the proposal, the brothers tried one last strategy. They hired a lawyer specializing in probate law to analyze if there were any legal loopholes that would allow them to challenge the individual inheritance. The lawyer, Mr. Franklin Pierce, was known in the city for his aggressiveness in family dispute cases. He scheduled a meeting with Claire, claiming he wanted to clarify some points about the inheritance. Ms. Claire, thank you for seeing me, said Mr. Pierce, sitting in the living room of her downtown apartment. Your brothers hired me to conduct a legal analysis of the entire inheritance situation. And what was your conclusion? Well, there are some aspects that deserve attention, he said, taking documents from a briefcase. For example, the issue of the necklace's international provenance. There is specific legislation about cultural property that may have been illegally removed from their countries of origin. Claire had already discussed this issue with Professor Thomas. Mr. Pierce, I have complete documentation that proves the legitimate provenance of the necklace. It has belonged to my family for over a century. Yes, but there's also the matter of the tax declaration. An item of such high value should have been declared to the tax authorities years ago. Omission can result in substantial fines. Grandma declared the necklace every year as an item with no commercial value. I have all her declarations right here. Mr. Pierce changed his strategy. There is also the possibility of a psychological challenge. Your recent decisions suggest a significant behavioral shift that may indicate emotional instability. My decisions are based on concrete facts and official documentation, replied Claire, showing Professor Thomas's report. If that is emotional instability, then every evidence-based decision would be questionable. The lawyer realized he wasn't intimidating Claire as he had hoped. Miss Claire, my clients would like to propose a friendly settlement. They are willing to offer $3 million for the necklace without questioning its legitimacy. Doctor, the necklace is worth at least $5 million according to technical appraisals. Why would I accept less than half its value? Because $3 million is guaranteed money with no legal headache. If you insist on keeping the necklace, I can guarantee there will be years of legal disputes. Claire stood up. Doctor, thank you for the visit, but I have no interest in negotiating with someone who threatens me. After the lawyer left, Claire called Professor Thomas and told him about the intimidation attempt. "Miss Claire, that was expected," he said. "When such high values are involved, there are always people trying to take advantage, but you can rest easy. Your documentation is irrefutable." "Professor, I've been thinking about the Vienna Museum's proposal." "And what is your decision?" "I would like to accept, but with one condition." "Which is?" "I want the exhibition to tell the whole story, not just about the jewel, but about how it came to me, about my great-grandmother, about the immigration, about how a noble family reinvented itself in the United States." "That would be extraordinary," said Thomas with enthusiasm. "A three-generation story connecting Austrian royalty to contemporary American reality. And I want part of the exhibition rights to be donated to an education fund in my city, so that other people can have opportunities I never had." Claire's generosity even impressed the professor. "Miss Claire, do you realize you may be giving up hundreds of thousands of dollars?" "Professor, I discovered I have an inheritance worth millions. I can afford to be generous." In the following weeks, preparations for the trip to Vienna intensified. The museum sent specialists to make detailed photographic documentation of the necklace, and historians began researching the life of Archduchess Maria Theresia in the United States. During this period, Douglas and Bradley made some desperate attempts at reconciliation. "Claire, can we talk?" asked Douglas, showing up at her downtown apartment on a Saturday morning. "About what?" "About our family, about the mistakes we made." Bradley was with him, looking genuinely remorseful. "Sister, we know we overreacted. We were worried, and we reacted poorly." Claire let them in but kept her emotional distance. "What do you want?" "We want our sister back," said Douglas. "We want to be a family again." "And how do you plan to do that?" Bradley took a deep breath. "We acknowledge that you were right from the start. The necklace really is special, and you deserve to have discovered that. And we want to support your decisions. If you want to travel to Europe, if you want to do the exhibition, if you want to do anything with the necklace, we support you." Claire observed them carefully. "What about the threats? The attempts to have me committed? The lawyer you hired?" Douglas lowered his head. "We've already dismissed Mr. Pierce, and we've cancelled any legal proceedings against you." "Why?" "Because we realized we were driven by envy and the fear of losing our status in the family," admitted Bradley. "When we saw that you had discovered something so important, our first reaction was to try to diminish your achievement." "And now?" "Now we want to learn from you," said Douglas. "We want to understand our family history better. We want to know our great-grandmother through your research." Claire fell silent for a few minutes, considering her brother's words. "Do you really want to know our family history?" "We do," they answered together. "Then I'll tell you everything I discovered, but on one condition." "What is it?" "You will never try to manipulate or threaten me again. If you disagree with my decisions, we talk like civilized adults." "We agree," said Bradley. "And do you publicly acknowledge that the necklace is mine, without contest?" "We do," said Douglas. In the following hours, Claire told her brothers the whole story she had discovered. She spoke about Archduchess Maria Theresia, about the escape during the war, about the life she built in the United States, hiding her noble origins. "Our great-grandmother must have suffered a lot," commented Bradley after hearing the whole story. "Imagine leaving behind an empire, a life of luxury, and starting from scratch in a foreign country," said Claire. "And she never told anyone about any of this?" "Probably for safety. At that time, revealing European noble origin could be dangerous. It was better to be a common immigrant." Douglas became thoughtful. "So Grandma knew all this when she left the necklace to you?" "She knew. And she chose to leave it to me because she knew I would be the only one to value the story behind the jewel, not just the monetary value." "How did she know that?" "Because you always showed more interest in money and status than in memories and feelings," said Claire, without resentment. "Grandma must have noticed that over the years." Bradley sighed. "She was right. Our first reaction was to calculate how much it was worth, not to discover what it meant." And when you realized it could be worth a lot, you tried to take it for yourselves, added Claire. It's true, admitted Douglas, and we apologize for that. In the following weeks, the three siblings grew close again. Douglas and Bradley showed genuine interest in the family history and even offered financial help for Claire's trip to Europe. I don't need financial help, she said, but I appreciate the gesture. Then how can we help? You can help me research more about our family. There must be other documents, other photos, other stories that Grandma kept. The three siblings spent days searching through the inherited house, looking for clues about the family's past. They found old letters, photographs, and even some objects that seemed to be of European origin. Look at this, said Bradley, showing a small music box with German inscriptions. And this photograph, said Douglas, showing a family portrait that appeared to be of Austrian aristocracy. Let's take everything to Professor Thomas to analyze, suggested Claire. The three siblings' trip to the university was different from all the previous ones. For the first time in years, they were working together for a common goal. Professor Thomas was impressed with the amount of historical material they had found. This is a documentary treasure, he said, examining the photographs. With this material, we can completely reconstruct the life of Archduchess Maria Theresia in the United States. Professor, would this change anything for the Vienna exhibition? It would change everything. Instead of just an exhibition about jewels, we would have an exhibition about the history of a royal family that reinvented itself on another continent. It's a unique story in the world. Thomas explained that the new discoveries would make the exhibition even more historically valuable. Museums from other countries had already shown interest in hosting the show after its run in Vienna. Ms. Claire, you could be starting a world tour, he said. Your family story could be told in Paris, London, New York. But I don't want this to become a spectacle, said Claire. I want it to be educational, to inspire people. And it will be. Your great-grandmother's story is a lesson in resilience, adaptation, and the human capacity to rebuild a life even after losing everything. Months later, Claire was in Vienna, walking through the halls of the palace where her great-grandmother had lived more than a century before. The exhibition, The Journey of Maria Theresa from Archduchess to Immigrant, had become an international success. The necklace was displayed in a special case, surrounded by photographs, documents, and other family objects. But what most impressed visitors was the complete story. How a royal woman had become a simple immigrant in the United States, creating a new life without ever losing her dignity. Douglas and Bradley had traveled to Vienna as well, paying for their own trips. They accompanied Claire on the guided tours and lectures, proud of the sister they had tried to humiliate. Claire, I have to admit something, said Douglas during dinner at a Viennese restaurant. What? I'm ashamed of how we treated you at the beginning of all this. Me too, agreed Bradley. Seeing this whole story, all this dignity of our great-grandmother, I realize how petty we were. Claire smiled at her brothers. What matters is that we grew, all of us. How so? I learned to value myself and not accept being treated as less important, explained Claire. And you learned that not everything in life is about money and status. Bradley raised his glass of wine. A toast to our great-grandmother, who even after death is still teaching us important lessons. And to our sister, added Douglas, who had the courage to discover the truth when everyone doubted. During her stay in Vienna, Claire met historians, descendants of other noble families, and people who shared similar stories of family reinvention. She discovered that her story was not unique, but it was special because of how it had been preserved through the generations. Miss Claire, said the museum director during the opening ceremony, you have brought us much more than a valuable jewel. You have brought a story of hope. Hope? Yes. The hope that no matter what we lose in life, we can always rebuild our identity and our future. Your great-grandmother lost an empire but gained a new family, and you lost the illusion of being ordinary but gained the awareness of being extraordinary. The exhibition remained in Vienna for 6 months before moving on to other European cities. In each location, Claire was invited to give talks about family history and memory preservation. When she returned to the United States, she found a transformed city. The story of her discovery had inspired other people to research their own family origins. The education fund she had created with part of the exhibition proceeds was already operating, offering scholarships to young people from humble families. "Ms. Clare," said a teenager during the inauguration of one of the educational programs, "you inspired me to research my own family. I discovered that my great-grandmother also came from Europe, fleeing a war. And what else did you discover? That it doesn't matter where we come from, but where we are going, and that every family has special stories, even if they seem ordinary." Claire smiled, remembering how ordinary she had felt just a few years before. 2 years after the initial discovery, Claire was in her downtown apartment, looking at a miniature version of the necklace that had been created for the permanent exhibition at a local history museum. The original necklace was kept in a special vault, but was regularly displayed in museums around the world. The doorbell rang. It was a special delivery, a letter from Vienna. "Dear Ms. Clare," the letter said, "we are pleased to inform you that the exhibition about your family has been selected to become part of the permanent collection of the Imperial Museum of Vienna. This means the story of Archduchess Maria Theresia will be told forever, inspiring future generations." Claire smiled, putting the letter away carefully. Her journey had begun with humiliation and scorn, but had transformed into something much bigger than she could have imagined. The phone rang. It was Douglas. "Sister, I saw online that the exhibition is becoming permanent in Vienna. It's true. I'm proud of you." "Truly?" "Thank you, Douglas." "Claire, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Do you regret anything in this whole story?" Claire thought for a moment. "I regret having doubted myself for so long, but I don't regret going through all of it. The hardships showed me who the truly important people in my life really were." "And us? Are we important people? You're my brothers. You will always be important. But now you're important in a healthy way, not out of obligation or fear." After hanging up, Claire walked to the balcony of her downtown apartment, from where she could see the whole city. It was the same view as always, but she had been completely transformed. Mrs. Dorothy appeared on the balcony next door. "Good afternoon, Claire. How was the delivery?" "Good news, the exhibition will be permanent in Vienna." "How wonderful! And how are you feeling?" Claire smiled. "I feel complete. I discovered where I come from. I know who I am, and I have clarity about where I'm going." "And where are you going?" "Where I've always wanted to go, Mrs. Dorothy. To a place where I can be myself without fear and without shame." That night, Claire wrote in her diary, "Today marks 2 years since I discovered the true value of Grandma's necklace. But more important than discovering it was worth millions was discovering that I was worth much more than I ever imagined. The journey taught me that we are not defined by what we inherit, but by what we do with our inheritance, and that sometimes what seems to be the smallest part of our fortune can actually be the greatest treasure we can receive." End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Claire made the right choices? How would you react if you discovered such a valuable inheritance? Share your sincere opinion in the comments. We are moved to tell stories that touch the soul and would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.